But what we know is that panelists and moderators are also very interesting people. And so, Mitchell, while you'll be in the moderator capacity a little bit later, I want to start out by asking you a few questions about yourself, and introduce us to who you are, some of your background and your experiences, and what makes this month in particular really important for you. So I'll turn it over. Would love for you to introduce yourself, and also share a little bit about your background.
Sure. Thank you so much for that. So my name is Mitchell Emrys. I do work here at Everfi. I run our project management and implementation teams. And I am a member of the LGBTQIA plus community, which is a wonderful thing to be a part of and has a really, really rich history that we get to talk about year round, but specifically during June, because June is Pride Month. And the reason that June is Pride Month is because back in 1969 in New York City at Stonewall, which was a queer space, some riots broke out. On a pretty regular basis in the 50s and 60s, the police used to raid queer spaces and arrest people and put them in jail unfairly and ruin their spaces and charge them, and sometimes ask for bribes to not arrest them. A group of people at Stonewall on June 28th of 1969 said that they didn't want to do that anymore, and fought back. And it wasn't the first time people fought back, but the fighting led to riots for 6 days. And it really started a national conversation and an international conversation around the treatment of LGBTQIA plus people. The first Pride March actually was in 1970, 1 year later, as an anniversary to the riots at Stonewall. It's expected that somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 people joined that march in New York City, and it slowly expanded year over year into what we know now today, which is that millions of people are celebrating Pride across the world, with some of our largest Pride parades and marches happening in New York City, in San Francisco, in Madrid, in Sao Paulo, each of those getting upwards of 5 million people each year, which is really, really exciting. But like I said, it didn't start in 1969. It's not like the LGBTQI plus people just sort of were born that day. There were really great groups called the Mattachine Society, which was formed in 1951, the Daughters of Bilitis, that was formed in 1955, that were all fighting for LGBTQIA rights for a very, very long time. In terms of what it's meant to me as a person who grew up and came out in a town where there weren't that many queer people, seeing the pride parades on television and seeing them, in articles and things like that, gave me hope that someday I would be able to attend something like that, that I would have a community that would surround me, and that the people who were sort of fighting with me at the time or making me feel bad about being myself were not the only people in the world. And so it gave me a lot of hope for the future. And I think today that's what the pride parades and pride events really, really show, is that there's hope and there's people that are really fighting for all of our rights.
Mitchell, thanks so much for that. And part of what I love about what you said is Pride Month in particular, while the community should be celebrated year round and considered year round and fought for year round, this month in particular highlights both the successes and the celebrations, but also doesn't ignore the struggles
Mm-hmm.
and the need to continue to focus on supporting the LGBTQIA community. And I think what it also brings up is, a really interesting space to talk about intersectional identities.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to be a part of the LGBTQIA plus community and to be a person of color?
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to be in the community and also, be an immigrant? And my own experience as a woman of color who is bisexual, that is something that um, you know deserves sort of its own kind of story and dialogue and understanding around what does it mean to hold all of these identities together, and as a student, what does it mean to explore these identities
Mm-hmm.
that you carry. And so I'm excited for you to dig in with this on on these topics with the panel. a little bit later. And so, I don't know if there's anything else that you, in terms of, before we turn it over and introduce the panel. And again, we want you all to engage with us in the chat. We saw a little bit of a note earlier, and where you all can either put in questions if you have them, or thoughts that if you want to share them with the group, you have the ability to do that. But before we move into the panel, Mitchell, anything else that's, I think, important for us to consider, as we're now halfway through the Pride Month. But is there anything else that you think we could read, watch, listen, do, learn more about if we're in an ally status, or anything that you would recommend in terms of tips in supporting the community, or being supported if you're part of the community?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of amazing organizations that are out there right now that are putting out a lot of rainbow stuff for people to buy, but there are a lot of BIPOC queer-owned businesses that you can find on Etsy and on Instagram. If you're interested in t-shirts or in, pins or things like that, that you want to show off your pride as an ally or as a member of the community, that I would suggest going there first. And finding those businesses and supporting them that way. And then in terms of listening, there are some really amazing podcasts if you like podcasts. There's one called Making Gay History that is 20-minute episodes and has changed my entire perspective. And so I'll mention that again at the end, but I think it's an important one to learn more about the community.
Excellent, excellent. Well, with that, I think this is a great time to introduce our panel, who also have tips and insights and stories and experiences to share. So I'll turn it over to you now to have them introduce themselves and for you to lead us in discussion.
Yeah, Joey, Justice, and Marissa, if you want to turn on your cameras. And Joey, I'm going to pass it to you first to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Really grateful to be with you all today. My name is Joey Colby Begovich. I am the Vice President of Guest Experience at the Washington football team. I identify as a gay man. I am married and a father of a 3-year-old adopted daughter.
That's amazing. Marissa?
Everybody, thanks for coming today. My name is Marissa Mealy. I'm a lawyer for the Packers. I was going to show off lovely Lambeau Field here, but the lighting is so terrible I had to close my blinds. I identify as gay, and I'm married. I have a wonderful wife who is a middle school teacher, actually, as luck would have it. And I'm just happy to be here with y'all.
Thank you. And Justice?
Hi, my name is Justice Tenpenny. I am also in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and I identify as a gay male, he, him pronouns, and I'm happy to be here to talk more about the community with everyone.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I know that one of the things that was really important to me and in being out and loud and proud is that representation wasn't there for me growing up. And so being able to see a panel of people who are willing to talk about their experiences within the queer community is life-changing for a lot of people. And it makes my heart smile that I get to sit here and talk with the three of you today. I'd love to sort of hear about your experiences with the community and with maybe your first Pride event, or what Pride Month has meant to you this year and in the past. Joey, I'll pass it to you first.
Thank you. It's interesting to hear you talk about your story, Mitchell, and hear that growing up you didn't see a lot of representation, right? Very similar. I grew up in a very small town in Minnesota. I went to school in a very small town in the state of Iowa, and I didn't come out until I was in my early 20s. And the first queer identified people that I met in my life happened to be at college, and it was the first time that I felt, because of other people that were going through the same thing that I was going through, trying to find my identity, that I was able to come out and start living my authentic life in that moment, with the support of not only a group of friends that were also coming out and identifying as gay, but also because of deep relationships that I had made at this point in my life as a young adult, of straight friends and allies that supported me. The very first time that I experienced Pride Month, I was 22 years old, and it was in Des Moines, Iowa. And we went to the Pride Parade. There was maybe, not what you see on TV today, or if you've been to a Pride event, hours long parades and businesses and things supporting it. It was 5 or 6 trucks, one, trailer being pulled by a tractor from the local, a local queer space with, some drag queens performing, and that was it. And throughout the years, I've had the opportunity to see Pride grow each month of June, and not just in June, but also throughout the year by being involved with different organizations like the Human Rights Campaign, and members of my family and friends being involved with PFLAG throughout the years, and going to different Pride events. And since I've become a father, since we adopted, Pride has become different for my family. Pride Month has become a celebration of what is possible with progress. And so, very high level, that's sort of my experience with Pride.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's so important to hear sort of that growth and that evolution. And I'm so excited for your daughter to get to experience Pride from such a young age.
Yes. She attended her first Pride parade at 5 weeks old.
No, oh, that's amazing. An ally or a member from the start. Marissa, would you like to talk about Pride in your experience?
That's tough to follow up, Joey. That was great. For me, Pride is a lot about family, togetherness, visibility, progress. So things are different now than what they used to be. And I also grew up in a small town where there wasn't much diversity, and what there wasn't very visible. So there were a few of us who knew about each other, but nobody was really out because it just wasn't done right at that time. And you didn't want to be the only person out because people felt different ways about it maybe than they do now. So it was that small group of people that was kind of the beginning for me, just having that diversity of even a small group of friends that understand your experience and you can share that with and share the people in your life with. And now that I've grown older, and for me too, going to college, meeting a lot of other people like me, being able to live intentionally and share my family with other people, like my wife now, being able to bring her to holiday events at work and be able to talk about her and not hide that part of myself, and to bring fully my true self everywhere is what Pride is about for me. So going to those neat events and parades, Madison, Chicago, Milwaukee, so much fun, have such a good time. But the fact that, even you just stop and you relish in the fact that there's so many people there, it's safe, there are so many allies there. It takes up the Summerfest grounds in Milwaukee. That's amazing. You just have to stop and just cherish that. So love to see Pride, love to see all, I know it's corny in some ways, but even seeing all the businesses change their logos to Pride logos. You all on this call, Joey, I think, could you have ever imagined that growing up, that we'd see these mainstream businesses have Pride logos? That is just unreal. So for me, Pride is just, we're here, and everybody's cool, and we're all friends, and we're all family and all together. So it's a great month.
Yeah, I think it's a really wonderful month, and I agree. The logos and the rainbows all over the cities are really wonderful to see, and I think really important. I actually have my in-laws visiting from Bogota, Colombia right now, and they were shocked to see all of the rainbows, but really excited because they've always been worried about the safety of myself and my husband, and they realized that we are in a city that cares about us and that we have places that we could go in case anything happens. So I totally agree.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Justice, what about you? Your experience with Pride?
Yeah, so I grew up in Milwaukee, so a little bit bigger city than some of the other panelists, but it was still a really interesting experience for me. I was very closeted, coming from a family who was not very accepting of the LGBTQ community, going to a school where LGBTQ views and lives were never represented. And then after I graduated high school, I moved to Green Bay to attend the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. And I thought, oh my God, like this is it. I'm free. I'm going to live authentically. I'm going to be who I am, which is interesting because it's not a switch that you flip. It's really a journey that you're on. And I kind of, when I turned 20, had this moment in my Poli-Sci 101 class when the teacher took about just 2 minutes out of the entire semester to cover this little thing called Stonewall. And I thought, what the heck is that? You know, I grew up thinking that same-sex marriage was the start and the end of the gay rights movement in America. And I had no idea what this was. And I started doing some research into kind of queer history and had my eyes opened for the first time. You know, I realized that I was in the closet. I was in an information closet. I didn't know anything about this community that I identified with. So that year when Pride in Green Bay rolled around, I decided to go, and it was like powerful experience for me. I remember being almost uncomfortable, right? Because I was what are drag queens? You know what I mean? And I was like, oh my God, like this drag queen's talking to me right now, and I don't know what to do. You know what I mean? And there was so many LGBTQ people. It was more LGBTQ people than I'd ever seen in my life in the same place. And people were holding hands and kissing. And I was like, well, you guys can't do that. Like, it's not safe. Like, you know, are we sure that we're safe here? And, you know, I realized the life that I was living was so like, I was living in fear. I was living in fear of what my identity was. I was living in this kind of mindset where I didn't know anything about my own kind of culture that I had identified with. And I remember after I'd been there for a couple hours, like I just kind of had to stop and take a breath. And it was a weird feeling for me because I didn't know what I was feeling. And I think that in that moment, it was the first time that I had ever in 20 years of my life felt like I belonged somewhere in the world. And it's very powerful to have that feeling. And it's also very powerful to realize that you've never felt like you belonged, like not in your school, not at home, and that you've never felt safe or had people that you could authentically share your experiences with. And that was really a life-changing moment for me. And it was when I decided to become an advocate and work in the LGBTQ community, because I realized the issues and the struggles that I had could be avoided in other people. And I wanted to work the rest of my life to make sure that it didn't take other people 20 years to finally feel like they belonged in their own communities. So Pride was a lot of fun, but it changed my entire life and has really made me who I am today.
That is so incredibly powerful, and thank you so much for sharing that. I think all of us can say that level of safety that we felt in that moment was really, really important. And I think it's a key characteristic of the community as a whole. You know, that we are extremely accepting and open to anybody of any background, of any different race, of any different gender. Are there any other characteristics that you guys see that you'd point out that are really prominent within our group?
I would say resilience and determination. If you think, you know, and it's maybe just because I'm old, Mitchell, but if you think that Stonewall happened in 1969, right? That's recent history, right? And it is because of resilience and determination, right? And creating allies, changing hearts and mind, creating spaces where people feel safe to speak up. We have come so far, and it's 2021. Now we have a long way to go, but because of resilience, because of determination, because of community, because of banding together, we have come so far. My husband and I got engaged where we had not yet, at a time where we had not yet reached marriage equality yet. And that was just in 2014. And so the more we band together, the more allies that join our fight for equity and equality is how we continue to persevere.
I think that's I want to add to that just really quick. And Joey, I don't know, it might be Zoom, but you don't look a day over 39 out there. So you're looking great. So, but no, I want to add to that. One thing that I've experienced in the LGBTQ community is that we have this level kind of empathy and understanding that other people don't have. I mean, when I meet people who are a part of the community, it's the first time that I've ever met them, but we inherently understand this big piece of each other that I think people who aren't a part of the community don't experience. You know, I always make the joke that I can talk to my other, queer friends and I can just go, ugh, high school. And then they're like, oh yeah, no, I get that. You know what I mean? And it's so easy. Because we all have had our challenges and our struggles with our identities, no matter what kind of homes we came from, or no matter what kind of cities that we showed up in, but we just have this level of empathy with each other because we get it. And it's beautiful, honestly. And I know a lot of people who are not a part of the community that have good listening skills and have a high level of empathy for others, but I just think I see it way more in the queer community than anywhere else.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have anything you would like to add to that, Marissa?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true, Justice. And I think, knowing and experiencing something like that, where it's not being able to share a core part of yourself or experience other things, I think makes us so open to inclusion, and that those, integrating those issues into our movement, I think is just such a natural fit for us, because how it feels to be, marginalized or to have to live in a certain way. And to your point, Joey, about resilience, that's also one of the things about Pride that's so wonderful, because like you said, Stonewall, that was recent in history. I know it doesn't feel like that to y'all on the call, but that was really recent. Same thing with employment discrimination. So you could fire someone up until pretty recently because they identified in a certain way. So you could be at your job, your boss could find out that you're gay, and they could say, you know what? We don't want you to work here because you're gay and those aren't our values. And there would be nothing you could do about it. And that was pretty recent that happened. And same thing with being able to marry your partner. Marriage isn't just the, wonderful romantic running away together, bouquet, those kinds of things. It's also about fundamental rights. So when you think about what does it mean to be able to be legally married? Now, this is me going down a legal nerd path that probably not everyone wants to go down. So I'll keep it brief. But there's certain rights that you have that if you are with one other person for the rest of your life that you need, right? Being able to go to the hospital and visit that person, you can otherwise, right? Being able to have those tax incentives, being able to own a home together, being able to both have a child together. There's so many fundamental, important human rights that we didn't have until very recently and would not have if not for the community coming together around Pride and being so brave and resilient to go and ask for those things and to make sure that they're done, because those fights are not easy. Those weren't easy doors to open. So I'm proud of us. Meta Pride. I'm proud of the Pride.
Yeah, I think it's so true. We have made so many strides in a short period of time for so many people who have been fighting for such a long period of time. And there are still so many things to sort of fight for. You know, there's 250 bills, I think, right now that are sitting on the Senate floor that are surrounding anti-LGBTQIA plus legislation. And so there's still a lot of people out there who don't think that we deserve the rights that we do. And so that fight is really, really important. I think what's interesting, you know, I want to call back to something that you said, Justice, earlier that I really identified with, which was the information closet. And being in that, because I felt like for so long I was in that as well, both in present day information as well as like the history of our community. And I worked very, very hard to learn a lot about the community. And I think I hold near and dear to my heart, Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson, who are trans women who were part of Stonewall, but who were fighting for a long time before that, and are a big reason why we have so many rights that we do and are oftentimes erased from our history because they are trans women of color. So I try and speak their names as often as possible, and the other trans women who are continuing to fight for us. But I'd love to hear if there are other people that each of you have that you sort of looked to or thought of as important members of our community.
I can go. The first person that I think of, so I went to a talk with him yesterday on Zoom. His name is Rick Welts. So Rick is in charge of the Warriors of Golden State. If you all like Steph Curry and all those folks, he's the big boss of the whole team and everything that they do. And Rick is openly gay. Now, Rick came out 10 years ago in a New York Times article when he was the president of the Phoenix Suns. And sports is one of, the places I think where it had been hard to come out. And he just went ahead and did it. And he was at the top of his game. And that to me was so amazing because that was just such a fundamental shift at the time. And that took a tremendous amount of bravery. And he's been a successful sports executive for forever. And since it's coming out in the past 10 years, it's only gotten better for him. So for me, who works in sports and looks forward to a career as an executive, I'm like, I can do that. That's okay. I don't need to worry about that. Rick can do it. I can do it. Now, Rick's a lot smarter than I am, but in terms of the gay, Rick can do it. I can do it.
Yeah. So, Mitchell, I'm really happy that you brought up Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson because they're probably two of my biggest heroes in the queer movement, right? So, I want to preface this by saying that I identify as a gay male, but I am also cisgendered and I am also white, which means that I understand that my position in this world is one of the most privileged, marginalized people, right? So I have a lot of experiences being a gay man and struggles, but people don't always see my identity because I don't necessarily wear rainbow skin, right? So I'm white and I'm a male, and that does give me a certain level of privilege. And it's part of the reason why people like Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson are so inspirational because they were trans people of color. And back in the 60s and the early 70s, when Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera were doing a lot of their work and advocacy, they identified actually as drag queens because back then there was no word for being trans. So it was a queen was meant to reference somebody who was trans, who was a drag queen, or who was a cross-dresser. And it was just another form of oppression on the LGBTQ community that we weren't even allowed to have the right words and definitions to be able to define who we were and how we felt. And it was so inspiring to me to learn about Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera because they were not only advocates, but they were willing to kind of stand up and say, enough is enough. And to see somebody with so much courage, it's hard not to be inspired, right? Like a lot of gay people at the time were just kind of living their lives in the closet, and they weren't being very public about who they were. And here was, Marsha P. Johnson, like walking down the road as a fully transgender person, like making friends with people, not caring about what people said about her, advocating for people. And that's really powerful, and it is very important to speak their names and to talk about them, because in the 70s, when the gay rights movement started getting a lot of movement, the white gay male population really started to push not only people of color out of the movement, but especially trans people of color. And there's a very great speech by Sylvia Rivera at a gay liberation kind of rally, where they would not let her talk and they would not let her on stage because she was a trans woman of color. And when she finally got up there and got the microphone, she said, I've had my nose broken for gay liberation. I've been arrested for gay liberation. I've given my life to gay liberation, and nobody cared about her. And this is unfortunately something that we're still seeing now, even in 2021. There is a epidemic of violence against the trans and gender nonconforming community in our nation. And most of these individuals who are being murdered and being attacked are also trans people of color. So as inspiring as it was to watch what those two women did back in 69 and throughout the 70s, and starting the first trans rights group in the 70s, it's important to understand that like the progress we have made is amazing, but there's a very long way to go. And that's kind of like at queer people and at not queer people. So yeah.
Yeah, they have a really robust history, and there's a lot out there now. And so I do implore a lot of people to go and read about them, because they are really important to our overall community. Joy, I don't know if you have anyone that you'd like to highlight. No? Okay. We are now going to actually pull up some poll questions for everyone to answer. And Marissa, Joey, Justice, as we're going through them, if you have anything that you want to add on to some of these questions, feel free to jump in here. Let's see. Awesome. Okay, first question. What is the term for a straight and or cisgender person who supports and advocates for the LGBTQIA plus community? Give it a moment. I will say that people who are straight or cisgender and support our community are really, really important to the overall movement, because it is you who sometimes they listen to, people listen to more often than not. And so I think it's really important to have as many allies as possible be part of these events to show it.
Oh, good job.
100%.
Wow, way to go, team. All right. Next question. True or false, 42% of people who are in the LGBTQIA plus community report living in an unwelcoming environment.
I think this question is really interesting too, because of the challenges that LGBTQ people can face at home can also lead to very high rates of homelessness in the queer community as well. It's important to remember the effects of not having a good home.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, it is true. Yeah. Next question. True or false? On May 17th, 2004, Massachusetts became the first US state to legalize same-sex marriage.
The marriage equality movement was a very important milestone in LGBTQIA history. And because of the bravery of the plaintiffs in those Supreme Court cases, we are able to have those rights that Marissa was telling us about today. It's not just about, entering a union with the person you love. It is about the human rights and the laws that come with it.
Yeah. I will say one of the most amazing experiences of my life was on June 26th, 2015, when marriage equality was passed in the Supreme Court. I went up to New York City for Pride, and Edie Windsor was the Grand Marshal. And it was just miles and miles of people just crying as she was going through. For anyone who doesn't know, she is one of the biggest reasons that we have marriage equality and helped fight for it. And then 5 years later, I actually got married on June 26th, 2020, on the steps of the Supreme Court. So it's a very, very important day. Okay, next question. True or false? The majority of teens who are LGBTQIA+ come out to their school guidance counselors first. I will say safe spaces at all levels within schools are very, very important. It is actually close friends are the first people that end up coming out to you. And I think that's an important piece for everybody who's listening here, that if you are an ally to the community and if you want to show that, make sure that you're open about it, because you never know who is listening and who might be struggling with it and who needs a safe space and somebody that they can trust if they don't feel like they can get that at home or in other places.
And I want to take, Mitchell, I want to take the opportunity to say that for many of us who couldn't necessarily find that growing up, you know, if anybody feels that way who's on the call, like just find me on Twitter, find me on LinkedIn. If you want to talk anytime, I'm happy to talk to you. Mm-hmm. I really am. So don't feel like you're alone, because you're really not.
Yeah. I do. I agree. I think all four of us would agree to that for sure. I don't know if we have any questions or anything that we could answer for anybody here. If not, I'm going to give a few minutes to everyone. If you think of anything, feel free to put it into the chat. But Justice, Joey, Marissa, I would love to get some final thoughts from you. Any sort of challenges or actions that you would like to see from people moving out of this chat. Marissa, if you want to go first.
Sure. I challenge you to just be there and be vocal, not necessarily about who you are, if that's not something you're comfortable with, but that you're an ally and that you support your friends, your family, people you don't even know. I think having vocal allies is critical, because it shows people, hey, you know what? I can talk to this person about this. I can be open with this person. I'm not alone. People feel good about me as who I am as a person. So, you know, wear that loud and proud that you're a true ally. And I think that'll pay dividends, not just for your friends around you, but for you.
Mm-hmm. I would add to that, Mitchell, you know, get involved. Mm-hmm. You know, at school, if you don't have a gay straight alliance, start one. If there is one, join it. If you're involved in one, see how you can be more visible in the community. And then, you know, this didn't exist when I was a child, but, you know, research and gain knowledge about the history of Pride, of the queer movement, and what work is left to do, what advocacy is left to do until we reach full equality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess for me, the first thing I really want to say is to anybody who might be listening who identifies as part of, the LGBTQ plus community. I know that especially when we're growing up, we hear a lot of people tell us that it gets better, and we hear that message a lot from different organizations, maybe from adults in our lives. But I just want you to realize that you have the right to demand that things are better, right? So when we say that it gets better, that doesn't just mean there's going to be a magical moment in your life where everything is fine. It's something that we have to work towards, and it's something that we have to demand from the people around us. We have to demand that they be better, that they have better policies, that they're more educated, and that they do their part in creating a space for us where we can feel affirmed and respected. And to anybody on the call who is not LGBTQ, I would really challenge you to go out and not just learn about the queer community, but also work on your listening skills, right? So this is a huge part of things that we talk about in Character Playbook, but it's also a huge part in just being another human for somebody else. Having listening skills and having the ability to empathize with somebody is not a skill you're going to use just for people that you meet in the LGBTQ community. It'll be a skill that you use in every facet of your life, but is most important when trying to be an ally to somebody, no matter what population that they belong to. And realize that you won't always know it all and you won't always understand everything, you know, but keep an open mind and keep learning and listening. And you know, the LGBTQ plus community cannot have progress and win all of the rights that we need without our straight allies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you all three so much for that. And I just want to point out two organizations quickly. One is the Trevor Project, which is a great organization that focuses on LGBTQIA plus youth. If you have any questions or concerns or thoughts, they're there. There's a hotline to call. And the other one's actually right over my shoulder. The Human Rights Campaign is a really wonderful organization that has a lot of the history, but also ways that you can volunteer and help out if you'd like. So thank you, Marissa, Justice, and Joey, for sharing your stories and sharing some of the history here. We would be, we have the Trevor Project link in the chat there. But thank you everyone for joining today. We're really excited about the future of Pride and the history that we have to share with you. And I hope you learned something today. Thank you.